Sarah's next.
Hi. Hi, so I'm Dan Wormser. I was Gabor's student for many years as an undergraduate and a graduate. And I think I'd like to kind of start with that impish smile that Sophia mentioned. Sometimes it was a pun, of course, that got it. But sometimes it was reminiscing about a great gotcha. And in this case, Gabor had been, I guess, in Italy the summer before. And he had noticed at the bottom of his bills, there was always this nominal little charge at the bottom with little SPP written afterwards. And he would ask the waiters, and they would either apologize or say, scratch it out. So at some point, he asked one of his colleagues, Italian colleagues, what this was. And they said, oh, yeah, they do that to tourists. It's se passa. And they just sort of pin it on the bill to see if it passes. And if it passes, and Gabor was very proud of himself. He was not one of those tourists that was going to be taken in by that. And honestly, that's part of, and of course, the impish smile when he told the story was classic. But that's I think, a real insight into why he was such a good physicist, because he had this eye for detail, and he knew when something wasn't quite right, and he wouldn't let it go. He would nail it and say, you know what, I don't really understand this unless this tiny little anomaly here is explained. And he would pursue it and often bust open, entirely new ideas. And so, that impish smile, I think, is part of what made him such a great physicist. It's that same mindset, that same personality trait. It all goes together. So, so I think now let's go back to 1977. So I was an undergraduate in 1977, just starting out, and he was my undergraduate advisor.
Yes, I most certainly
And
would.
so there it was. First couple of weeks in school. And I was actually called over to the dean's office because the dean knew us. In fact, it's great to hear the names George and Deha, because I grew up with them too. Because Deha was a psychiatrist. And so my dad was a psychiatrist. And so we knew each other. And so George called me in to see how I was doing. And oh my God, his face lit up when he heard that Gabor was my undergraduate advisor. He really, really let me know that Gabor was the best of the best. Not just as a scientist, but as a mentor. He thought I was set for life. I mean, he really did. And George, really, right there, he told me he was very proud of the fact that he felt he had a role in bringing Gabor to Hopkins. And he was just one of the things he was proudest of, which was, I think, it's sort of a very interesting thing right there at the beginning to tell a young undergraduate. But he was very, very pleased. And so I took that coming out of that office, and, everything that happened after that told me how right George was about that. Because really, as an undergraduate, as a graduate student, and so on, these were, without question, the most exciting and intellectually stimulating years of my life. And, the reason is that it wasn't just going to school when I would work with Gabor. It was going on a voyage of exploration. And then the reason is that he really embodied that beautiful description that Chaucer has of the scholar, where he would say, gladly would he learn and gladly would he teach. Gabor was enthusiastic about learning as he was about teaching. And it was infectious, as Alex said, it was infectious. That enthusiasm about learning, teaching, exploring physics and science was really something that all of us just experienced every day we came in. And that's why, coming in was such a pleasure every morning when we could work with him. And there were just so many of the interesting nooks and crannies about physics that we could explore. It wasn't just, particle theory, estimating. It was everything. I mean, it was I remember he's having me code up, and then we were exploring, you know, relativistic fluid dynamics, out of Landau and Lipschitz. And I guess he knew Landau, I guess. And so, this was a different world because usually in American physics, this world of relativistic fluid dynamics was something that was far away. And this is something that becomes very important later in my career. And then, of course, the substructure of baryons, which is such an exciting, just one exciting problem after another. And then finally, just at the dawn of the era of string theory, exploring, he had, I think, learned from Zumino in his in Europe, this idea that we really needed to understand 10-dimensional, how general relativity works in 10 dimensions. And it was really surprising that there were extra things. And going on this voyage of exploration with Gabor and Zsuzsa to sort of explore this strange new world. I mean, I can't imagine a more exciting way to begin a career in physics than to write a thesis about a topic like that. And it's just always reminds me just how incredibly lucky I was to be able to learn at the side of two physicists like that. And really just live something like that. And so it was, and that, that really was a journey that would have been, traveling around the world with Magellan would have been more dangerous, but no more exciting. Really, it really was. And Gabor really, you mentioned, or I think Stephen Weinberg was mentioned, but this is where Gabor really stands out a little different from so many of the other physicists. Is he really did care about the next generation. I think that's why we're here, right? I mean, more than so many others, it wasn't just a static thing. He was here also pass on what he had learned to others and to the next generation. And that was really something I think all of us would appreciate. And I was a little unusual. I sort of decided I didn't want to go down the usual path of physics. And Gabor, again, I was uniquely fortunate to have Gabor as my guide and mentor because he instantly knew the place for me to do that. He sent me out to La Jolla, California, not the University of California, but another small institute, to apply basically apply modern physics, modern particle theory to classical fields, classical field theory. Again, something where who else but Gabor would even have thought of such a thing or known of such a place and had the Rolodex to find me a place like that. And the thing is, he prepared me for it because, as we said, when he taught, he's the one who taught us, fluid dynamics, out of Landau and Lipschitz and so on. For him, he wasn't a particle physicist; he was a physicist in every sense of the word. And so, he was really at my side as I went into applied physics and continued in San Diego, then worked for the Navy and so on, just doing applied physics. At every step of the way, Gabor was at my side. And even more recently, as I went into, out of physics a little bit more into this strange world of policy and diplomacy or so on. Again, Gabor, the Renaissance man, meant I wasn't alone. It was something where he never left. His influence never left me. And thinking, what would Gabor say? What is the right thing to do here, and so on. That never stops. That never stops. Just last week, I thought, gee, what would Gabor say? What would be the right thing to do? And it is that way, because he was everything. He was so many languages. It was the physics, it's all something I've carried to this day. And so that I think is what I want to leave everybody with, is the extent to which, you know, he touches you and then he stays at your side for a lifetime. He's just such a remarkable person, such a remarkable individual, such a great guy. And I appreciate it to this day. So that's
I think the closer you are to the microphone, the better